In the days before kings ruled Israel, when the voices of prophets were rare and the people often wandered far from God's ways, there lived a woman named Hannah. She was a woman of deep faith, but she carried a heavy sorrow in her heart. You see, Hannah had no children. In a time and culture where motherhood was seen not only as a blessing but a mark of honor, Hannah's empty arms brought her deep pain and shame. Her husband, Elkanah, loved her dearly. Every year, he took his family to worship the Lord at Shiloh, where the tabernacle of God was. There, sacrifices were offered, and prayers were lifted. But despite Elkanah's devotion and his attempts to comfort her, Hannah's grief remained. One particular year, as they visited Shiloh, Hannah went to the tabernacle alone. Overwhelmed by sorrow, she knelt and prayed. Her lips moved, but her voice made no sound. Her heart cried out to God, saying, "Lord Almighty, if you will look upon my misery and remember me and give me a son, I will give him back to you all the days of his life." Nearby sat Eli, the high priest, watching her closely. Seeing her mouth move without hearing her voice, he mistakenly assumed she was drunk and rebuked her. But Hannah, still gentle and humble, explained, "I am not drunk, my lord. I am pouring out my soul before the Lord." Eli, realizing his mistake, softened, said, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant your request." And indeed, God heard her prayer. In time, Hannah gave birth to a son. True to her vow, when Samuel was old enough to leave her side, she brought him to the tabernacle and left him in the care of Eli, dedicating him to serve the Lord. Though it must have torn at her heart to let go of her precious child, Hannah rejoiced in knowing that her son was chosen by God. And in her joy she sang a beautiful song, a prayer of praise that echoed through the generations, declaring that God lifts the humble and brings low the proud. Thus began the life of Samuel, a child born of prayer, set apart for a divine purpose. From a very young age, Samuel lived in the tabernacle at Shiloh, where the Ark of the Covenant was kept. Though just a boy, his days were filled with sacred duties. He wore a little linen ephod, like the priests, and helped with the work of the tabernacle, lighting the lamps, opening the doors, and serving Eli the high priest. Hannah, though she had given Samuel to God, never forgot him. Every year, when Elkanah brought the family to Shiloh, she brought Samuel a little robe she had made with her own hands. Each stitch in that robe carried a mother's love and prayers. Eli would bless Elkanah and Hannah, saying, "May the Lord give you children by this woman for the one she asked for and gave to the Lord." And God did bless her. Hannah went on to have 3 more sons and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, young Samuel continued to grow, not just in height and strength, but in favor with both God and people. In contrast, Eli's own sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were corrupt priests. They treated the offerings of the Lord with contempt and acted immorally, even at the entrance to the tabernacle. Though Eli was aware of their wicked behavior, he only gave them a weak rebuke and did not stop them. God saw it all, and he was not pleased. One day, a man of God came to Eli with a stern message. He told Eli that because he honored his sons more than he honored God, judgment would come upon his household. No old man would remain in Eli's family, and both of his sons would die on the same day. The Lord would raise up a faithful priest to serve him instead. All the while, Samuel served faithfully, unaware of the full weight of the calling that lay ahead. Then one quiet night, something extraordinary happened. Samuel was lying down in the tabernacle, close to the Ark of God. It was late, and the lamp of God had not yet gone out. Suddenly, he heard a voice call his name, "Samuel." He got up and ran to Eli. "Here I am, you called me." But Eli said, "I didn't call you. Go back and lie down." Samuel went back to bed. Again, the voice came, "Samuel." He got up once more and went to Eli. "Here I am, you called me." Again, Eli said, "I didn't call you, my son. Go lie down." When the voice called Samuel a 3rd time, Eli finally realized what was happening. It was the Lord calling the boy. Eli said to Samuel, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you again, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel returned to his bed and waited. And then the Lord came and stood there, calling as before, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel replied, "Speak, for your servant is listening." Then the Lord spoke to Samuel and told him something very difficult. He was going to bring judgment on Eli's house because of the sins of his sons and Eli's failure to restrain them. It was the first message God ever gave to Samuel, and it was a heavy one. In the morning, Samuel was afraid to tell Eli what the Lord had said. But Eli insisted and said, "Do not hide it from me." So Samuel told him everything. Eli listened quietly and responded, "He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes." From that day forward, the Lord was with Samuel. As he grew, God continued to speak to him, and all Israel came to recognize that Samuel was a prophet of the Lord. The silence of the past was broken. Once again, the people of God had a voice to lead them. As Samuel grew into adulthood, the Lord was with him. Everything he said came to pass, for God's Spirit rested on him. All of Israel, from Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south, came to know that Samuel was established as a prophet of the Lord. He became a trusted voice, honest, faithful, and obedient. And the Lord continued to reveal himself to Samuel at Shiloh. But Israel, as a nation, was still struggling. Spiritually, the people were not walking closely with God. Their enemies, especially the Philistines, remained a constant threat. Tensions mounted, and eventually war broke out between Israel and the Philistines. At the first battle, Israel was soundly defeated. 4,000 soldiers were killed. Confused and shaken, the elders of Israel asked themselves, "Why did the Lord allow us to be defeated?" And rather than seek God's counsel through Samuel, they made a dangerous decision. They said, "Let us bring the Ark of the Covenant from Shiloh, so that it may save us from the hand of our enemies." But they treated the ark like a magic box, forgetting that God's power isn't something to be controlled or manipulated. They brought the ark to the battlefield, and with it came Hophni and Phinehas, the corrupt sons of Eli. When the ark entered the Israelite camp, a great shout went up. The people were confident that victory was assured. Even the Philistines trembled when they heard the roar, saying, "A god has come into their camp. Woe to us!" But the outcome was not what Israel expected. In the battle that followed, 30,000 Israelite soldiers died. The Ark of God was captured, and Hophni and Phinehas were both killed, just as God had said they would be. When a messenger brought this devastating news to Eli, who was now 98 years old and nearly blind, his heart broke. But it was not the death of his sons that overwhelmed him. When he heard that the Ark of God had been captured, he fell backward off his chair, broke his neck, and died. On the same day, Phinehas's wife, who was pregnant, heard the news and went into labor. As she lay dying, she named her son Ichabod, meaning the glory has departed from Israel, for the ark had been taken and great sorrow had fallen upon the people. But even in Israel's darkest hour, God had not abandoned his people. The ark among the Philistines. The Philistines took the ark of God to the city of Ashdod and placed it in the temple of their god, Dagon. They thought they had defeated not just Israel, but Israel's God. But the Lord would not let his name be mocked. The next morning, the statue of Dagon had fallen on its face before the ark. They set it back up. But the following morning, it had fallen again, this time with its head and hands broken off. Then, the people of Ashdod began to suffer from tumors and great affliction. Panic spread. The ark was moved from city to city, Gath, then Ekron, but wherever it went, the people were struck with disease and fear. After 7 long months, the Philistines had enough. They realized this was no ordinary object. They had dishonored the living God, and now they desperately wanted to return the ark. They called for their priests and diviners and asked, "How can we send the ark back to Israel?" The priests advised them, "Do not send it back without a guilt offering. Place it on a new cart pulled by 2 cows that have never been yoked." The cows pulled the cart directly to the Israelite town of Beth-Shemesh, never turning to the left or right. The people rejoiced when they saw the ark returning, but some looked inside the ark, an act strictly forbidden. As a result, many were struck down. The fear of the Lord returned to the people. They sent word to the nearby town of Kiriath-Jearim, and the ark was moved there, where it remained for 20 years. Samuel leads Israel. During those years, Samuel continued to grow in wisdom and leadership. He called the people to return to the Lord with all their hearts. He said, "Rid yourselves of foreign gods and commit yourselves to the Lord. Serve him only, and he will deliver you from the Philistines." The people listened. They gathered at Mizpah, fasted, confessed their sins, and repented. It was a turning point. But while they were gathered, the Philistines planned a surprise attack. The Israelites, frightened, pleaded with Samuel, "Do not stop crying out to the Lord for us." Samuel offered a young lamb as a burnt offering and prayed for the people. As he did, the Lord thundered mightily against the Philistines. Panic seized the enemy army, and Israel defeated them in battle. To commemorate the victory, Samuel set up a large stone and named it Ebenezer, meaning, "Thus far the Lord has helped us." It was a reminder that their strength came not from themselves, but from God. And under Samuel's leadership, there was peace. He traveled from town to town, serving as a judge and prophet, helping the people return to a life of justice and faith. He built an altar to the Lord and kept Israel focused on the one who had rescued them again and again. Samuel had served Israel faithfully for many years. He was both a judge and a prophet, a spiritual leader, a teacher of God's ways, and a voice that spoke with wisdom and clarity. He had helped bring peace and justice to the land, and the people respected him deeply. But as Samuel grew older, change was on the horizon. He appointed his sons, Joel and Abijah, to serve as judges in Beersheba. Sadly, they did not walk in Samuel's righteous ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain, accepted bribes, and perverted justice. The people took notice, and they were deeply concerned. A delegation of elders from across Israel came to Samuel and said, "You are old, and your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have." Samuel was hurt. This request pierced him to the core. He had spent his life leading the people in obedience to God, and now they wanted to follow the example of the surrounding nations. Samuel took their request to the Lord in prayer, and the Lord answered him, "Listen to the people. It is not you they have rejected, but me as their king. From the day I brought them up out of Egypt until now, they have been forsaking me and serving other gods. Listen to them, but warn them solemnly, and let them know what a king will do." So Samuel called the people together and gave them a strong warning. He said, "This is what the king who rules over you will do. He will take your sons and make them serve in his army. He will take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, and bakers. He will take your best fields, vineyards, and olive groves and give them to his officials. He will take 1/10 of your grain and livestock. You will become his servants. And when that day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, but the Lord will not answer you." But the people refused to listen. No, they said, "We want a king over us. Then we will be like the other nations, with a king to lead us and go before us into battle." So Samuel brought their words before the Lord, and the Lord said, "Listen to them and give them a king." It was a sad moment, not because kingship was wrong in itself, but because the people were rejecting God's leadership in favor of human strength and appearances. Still, God would use even this to fulfill his greater plan. The anointing of Saul. Soon after, God directed Samuel to a man named Saul, the son of Kish, from the tribe of Benjamin. Saul was tall and handsome, head and shoulders above everyone else. He looked the part of a king. But more importantly, God had chosen him. Their meeting came about in a surprising way. Saul had been searching for his father's lost donkeys and wandered from town to town. Eventually, he was told that a man of God, Samuel, might be able to help him. When Saul arrived in the town where Samuel was, God spoke to Samuel and said, "This is the man I spoke to you about. He will govern my people." Samuel invited Saul to a meal, honored him before the guests, and the next day privately anointed him with oil, declaring, "Has not the Lord anointed you ruler over his inheritance?" Samuel gave Saul several signs that would confirm the Lord's call on his life. As Saul turned to leave Samuel, God changed his heart. And soon, everything Samuel had said came true. When the time came to publicly present Israel's first king, Samuel gathered the people and had them cast lots by tribe and family. The lot fell to Saul, but when they looked for him, he was nowhere to be found. They eventually discovered him hiding among the supplies, shy, uncertain, and overwhelmed. Still, when Saul stood up, the people saw his impressive appearance and shouted, "Long live the king!" Though some doubted him, Saul returned home, and God touched the hearts of brave men who followed him. Samuel reminded the people of God's faithfulness and wrote down the rights and duties of kingship. But the transition was only beginning. Victory and renewal. Soon a crisis arose that tested Saul's leadership. Nahash, the king of the Ammonites, besieged the city of Jabesh Gilead. The people pleaded for peace, but Nahash gave them a humiliating offer. He would make peace only if he could gouge out the right eye of every man in the city. The people were horrified and sent messengers throughout Israel. When the news reached Saul, the Spirit of God came upon him powerfully. He burned with righteous anger, slaughtered oxen, and sent to pieces throughout the land, warning, "This is what will be done to the oxen of anyone who doesn't follow Saul and Samuel into battle." The fear of the Lord gripped the people, and a great army assembled. Saul led them into battle and crushed the Ammonites. It was a great victory, and the people rejoiced. Then they turned to Samuel and said, "Who was it that said Saul shouldn't be king? Bring those men here so we may put them to death." But Saul showed mercy. "No one shall be put to death today, for this is the day the Lord has rescued Israel." And so the people gathered at Gilgal and reaffirmed Saul as king before the Lord. They offered sacrifices, and Saul and all Israel rejoiced together. Samuel's farewell address. Now that Saul was firmly established, Samuel stood before the people one last time to deliver a powerful farewell address. He began by asking the people to testify against him. "Have I taken anyone's ox or donkey? Have I cheated or oppressed anyone?" The people answered, "You have not cheated or oppressed us. You have done no wrong." Samuel then reminded them of all that God had done for them from the time of Moses and Aaron through the days of the judges, and even now. He warned them that while they had asked for a king, they must still fear the Lord and serve him faithfully. To confirm his message, Samuel prayed, and the Lord sent thunder and rain that day, an unusual event during the dry season. The people were terrified and said, "Pray to the Lord your God for us, so that we will not die." Samuel reassured them, "Do not be afraid. You have done all this evil, yet do not turn away from the Lord. Serve him with all your heart. Do not turn after useless idols. For the sake of his great name, the Lord will not reject his people." He ended with a solemn promise and a challenge. "As for me, far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord by failing to pray for you. But I will teach you the way that is good and right. Only fear the Lord and serve him faithfully with all your heart." Samuel stepped back from political leadership, but he never stopped praying for or guiding the people. He remained the steady voice of God in a time of change, a man who never sought power for himself but gave his life to serve the Lord. After Samuel's farewell, Saul's reign as Israel's first king continued. At first, the people looked to Saul with hope and excitement. He was tall, strong, and courageous, the perfect image of a leader to defend the nation and bring unity. Yet, as time went on, it became clear that ruling a nation was not an easy task, and Saul struggled to fully obey God's commands. One of the defining moments of Saul's reign came when the Philistines, longtime enemies of Israel, gathered a massive army for war. Saul assembled the Israelites at Gilgal and waited for Samuel to come and offer sacrifices to the Lord before battle. But Samuel was late. Saul grew impatient. The people were beginning to scatter. Taking matters into his own hands, Saul performed the burnt offering himself, a task only the priest was allowed to do. No sooner had he finished when Samuel arrived. Samuel confronted Saul sternly. "What have you done? You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart to be ruler over his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command." This moment was a clear turning point. Saul had broken God's law and lost his favor. Though he remained king, God's blessing had been withdrawn, and the kingdom would eventually be given to another. Soon after, The Lord gave Samuel a command to convey to Saul, "Go and completely destroy the Amalekites, the people who opposed Israel when they came out of Egypt. Destroy everything they have. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys." Saul obeyed partially. He led the army against the Amalekites and defeated them. But instead of destroying everything as God commanded, he spared Agag, the Amalekite king, and kept the best of the sheep and cattle as spoils. When Samuel came to meet Saul after the battle, he was shocked to hear that Saul had not fully obeyed. Samuel said, "Why did you not obey the Lord? Why did you pounce on the spoil and do evil in the eyes of the Lord?" Saul defended himself, saying, "The people spared the best animals to sacrifice to the Lord." Samuel's response was both heartbreaking and firm. Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. Samuel then gave the painful order to bring King Agag forward and executed him, symbolizing the seriousness of disobedience to God. From that day forward, Samuel mourned for Saul, the king's failure. The Lord told Samuel that he had rejected Saul as king and instructed him to go to Bethlehem to anoint a new king from the sons of Jesse. Samuel was afraid, for Saul would be furious if he found out. But God encouraged him, saying, "Take a heifer with you and say, 'I have come to sacrifice to the Lord.' Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you whom to anoint." At Bethlehem, Jesse presented 7 of his sons to Samuel. One by one, Samuel looked at them, strong, tall, capable young men. But God said to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or height, for I have rejected him." The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Finally, Jesse called for his youngest son, David, who was tending the sheep in the fields. When David arrived, God told Samuel, "This is the one." Samuel anointed David in secret, and from that day the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. Though David was young and seemingly an unlikely king, God's choice was based on his heart, a heart after God. David's story with Saul is one of the most well-known in the Bible. David began serving Saul as a musician, playing the harp to soothe the king's troubled spirit. Over time, David became Saul's armor-bearer and a great warrior. When the Philistine giant Goliath challenged Israel, it was David who stepped forward. With only a sling and a stone, David defeated Goliath, demonstrating faith in God rather than strength or weapons. David's victories made him popular, but they also made Saul jealous and fearful. The king's jealousy grew into a dangerous obsession, leading Saul to try to kill David several times. Yet, David respected Saul as the Lord's anointed king and refused to harm him, even when he had the opportunity. As David grew in fame and favor, Saul's heart darkened with fear and envy. Though David had no intention to overthrow him, Saul's insecurity drove a wedge between them. David became a mighty warrior, leading Israel's armies to victory against their enemies. He showed great courage, wisdom, and faith in the Lord. The people loved him, singing, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." This praise only fueled Saul's jealousy further. Saul's attempts to kill David became more frequent and dangerous. David was forced to flee for his life, becoming a fugitive. He gathered a group of loyal followers and wandered through caves and wilderness, always evading Saul's men. Even in these difficult times, David trusted God. He refused to harm Saul, saying, "The Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed." His respect for God's authority and his patience in suffering became a powerful testimony. At one point, David had Saul cornered in a cave. Instead of killing him, David secretly cut off a corner of Saul's robe to prove that he could have taken his life but chose mercy. When Saul left the cave, David revealed himself and pleaded for his life. Saul was moved and admitted that David was more righteous. Though Samuel had passed from the scene, his influence was still deeply felt. He had prepared the way for both Saul and David, anointed both kings, and served as God's faithful prophet. Samuel's life teaches us about faithfulness, obedience, and trusting God's timing. He was a man who listened carefully for God's voice and courageously delivered his messages, even when they were difficult to hear. The story of Samuel also reminds us that God looks at the heart, not just outward appearances. While Saul was tall and handsome, David was chosen because of his heart. And it is this kind of heart, faithful, humble, and obedient, that God desires from each of us. The story of Samuel is a beautiful journey from prayerful childhood to wise prophet and faithful leader. It's about God's faithfulness even when people falter, His mercy when we repent, and His sovereignty in guiding history. Samuel's story encourages us to listen for God's voice, obey His commands, and trust Him even when the path is unclear. Though the people demanded a king like other nations, God's plan was greater. He chose leaders not for their outward strength, but for their hearts. And through Samuel, Saul, and David, we see God's hand shaping the future of Israel and preparing the way for the coming Messiah. May Samuel's story inspire us to seek God wholeheartedly, to serve faithfully, and to trust that thus far the Lord has helped us.
Thank you so much for watching and walking through this powerful story of the Bible. Your support helps us keep sharing these life-changing stories from the Bible. And don't forget to hit the bell icon, so you never miss a moment of hope and truth. Stay blessed.